what's your view of a situation like the Durant? Because that's got to be the toughest thing for an organization. You're paying this guy $30 million. He's your best player. He might be the key to winning another championship. So, I mean, your natural instinct is, hey, let's push this guy along. Let's get him on the court. That's what everybody's job is. It's his job to play. It's your job to get him ready to play. So how do you exercise enough caution in that situation that maybe you aren't asking somebody to re-injure themselves?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough situation and an interesting question and dynamic. And now with my work on the agent side, I can see both sides very clearly. And as a former management person, of course, you want your star player on the court and participating, especially in a championship series. But I do think I don't really hold the Warriors at fault on a situation like this, because the players today have their own personal trainers, they have their own doctors, and I think that Kevin Durant got lots of guidance from his own people before he made the decision to ever come back. And I really believe that team athletic trainers, even though they're paid by the team, I think that they are today very cognizant of wanting not to make mistakes and not push people along too soon. And I think that they really believe that he was ready. And you look at the first quarter,
great.
And he was great. He was great. He hit those first three shots. It was like, oh my goodness, how amazing that was. And then the injury occurs, and wow, it's just, I mean, so devastating to see that happen. And I don't think anybody envisioned that there would be an Achilles injury that would come out of a calf problem. But sometimes that happens when you're trying to one area is being protected and the other area is vulnerable. And so just a crazy confluence of events, so to speak, that had happened, and very unfortunate. And so, but yeah, I really don't, I can't blame the team in that situation. And we had situations like that where players were put out to play, and we thought they were ready, and they thought they were ready, and then they re-injure. And so I think that what I always try to talk to our team athletic trainers and doctors about is hey, let's just make sure that if we have to hold them out another week if necessary, that's something we'll do, just because we want to make sure that the chance of re-injury is not there. And I think of guys like Dalvin Cook, for example, and how important he is to this football team this year, and Xavier Rhodes, another guy, and you think about their injuries mid-season last year when they were both down for, Dalvin was down for 6 weeks basically, and it had a big impact on the season. And so I think the challenge for the Vikings is, how do we keep these guys healthy? How do we continue to improve them? And as you mentioned, things like nutrition are important, things, the workout schedule, and what do they do even during this dead period? Well, don't do nothing. You got to keep yourself ready to go, and it's a fine-tune, how fine-tuned these players are, and so, and I think that's also a big difference. Getting back to our initial thought today, the big difference in players today versus what they were when I first came in the league. And players back in the 70s, late 70s, they would come to training camp to get in shape and figure that we had there were 6 weeks of camp. There were 6 preseason games that were god awful and horrible, and so they figured, I've got time to get ready to go. Whether it's the Jim Marshalls, the Carl Ellers, and those kind of guys, the Alan Pages. Well, I don't think Alan ever got out of shape, but today you don't come to training camp trying to get in shape, because they're day one of training camp, they're going full bore, and that's how you can get hurt if you're not in shape, ready to go. So even during this dead period, you'll see guys working out.
Oh, absolutely. Let's wrap up the show with 2 running backs. Quick notes on 2 running backs. Once again, thanks to White Bear Lake Superstore, whitebearlakesuperstore.com. What is your view of Todd Gurley? Because there were concerns about his knee coming out of college. The Rams take him. He has been spectacular, but now who knows if he'll be hampered. Do you have just any thoughts on his value and his path at this point?
Yeah, well, I think it was obvious that he was not right at the end of last season, especially in the Super Bowl, and that they were rotating him. When he's an elite player, the highest paid running back in the league at the time, you knew something was wrong. And of course, they never said anything, and they insisted he was fine, but we all knew differently. And so how do they manage that? I think that's the question. How do you manage an elite athlete like that who has somewhat of an injury history? And it's challenging. And we went through a similar situation with Robert Smith back in the 90s, and I think that it was always interesting to me and I always tell the story about how he would come to training camp, try to sign a 1-year deal, and report late to training camp. And you were covering those years, you know what his MO was. And I always had the coaches would say to me, "Where's Robert? Where's Robert? We want him in here." And I said, "He'll be here. He'll be here." And he had this clock in his head that he was going to show up basically 2 weeks or 10 days before the first regular season game and sign his contract. And I knew what he was doing, and he knew what he was doing, and Neil Cornrich's agent knew what he was doing. And I was frankly okay with it. I was not okay with it with a rookie such as David Palmer, who held out for 3 weeks in 1995 and ended up pulling a hamstring and didn't know the system, didn't know what to do. But for a veteran player and a guy who had been hurt, I was okay with what Robert was doing. And so how do the Rams manage Todd Gurley this year in camp? I think you'll see them being very careful with his reps and trying to maximize his ability come opening day and come the regular season. And even during the regular season, I think they're going to try to manage his time on the field and try to have him peak for the postseason. But you got to be careful about that too, because sometimes you don't make the postseason.
Yeah, very true. Recently, Adrian Peterson told Ben Gessling from my paper, the Star Tribune, that he did plan on retiring as a Viking. I don't think that's very surprising, but did that strike you in any way?
It struck me kind of like, who really cares?
Yeah, I know.
And
excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, Adrian Peterson obviously had a great career here, but ended on a kind of a down note, and with the whole child abuse case and how he never really got it, never really understood the outrage that was out there, and that, oh, this is the way I was raised and all that, and this is not 20 years ago. And so I think that to me, I don't think the fan base is that enamored with him anymore, and I'm not sure that people really necessarily cared that he's retiring a Viking, and so that to me was kind of a self-serving ego deal on his part, and so be it. If that's the way he wants to work it, fine. But I think to most of us, it's kind of much ado about nothing.
Yeah, it didn't do a lot for me, but I thought I'd see if you had a different view of it, and you didn't. You had the same view.
I do.
If you have a final thought, Jeff, hit me with it. Thanks again to White Bear Lake Superstore, whitebearlakesuperstore.com. You can go by there in person. You can go online. You can chat with them via the website. We appreciate their support. Final thought, Jeff, as we head into quiet time in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, first of all, I'm happy that the OTAs and minicamp season are over, so we don't have to hear about Odell Beckham and Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, whether they're showing up for voluntary workouts or not, or whether they're coming to the mandatory mini camps. I thought that story was just way overdone this spring, and just, to me, it was ridiculous that they weren't there. They should have been there. They're with new teams, and they need to learn the new systems and all that. And so I'm glad we're past all that. I'm glad we're past the Kyle Rudolph situation, and that now we get into the real stuff, which is training camp coming up and preparation for training camp. And so, meanwhile, I think it is a time that people need to recharge their batteries. And as Cousins talked about at his press conference at the end of minicamp, it is important that players do take this time and kind of get themselves mentally and physically prepared for training camp. But again, do something. Don't do nothing during this dead period. You got to be ready come end of July.
And we're not going to do nothing either. We're going to keep doing these shows throughout the off season. There are always issues about the NFL. There's always interest in the league. We appreciate everybody listening. We'll be back next week with Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider.